I'm Brian Hanks. I'm the Acting Public Information Officer for the City of Kinston. Thank you for coming to today's press conference about the April 12th incident that involved David Lee Bruton. Before we get started, I just want to let you know the officials up here are not going to be able to discuss the incident that occurred on April 28th with the accident on MLK Boulevard. That incident remains under investigation by the State Highway Patrol. As soon as we're able to disseminate information about it, we will certainly do so. Here's how today is going to go. Mayor Dontario Hardy will speak first. He'll be followed by Kinston Police Department Chief Tim Dilday. Finally, John Eric Combs, an independent investigator from Fayetteville, will share the results of his investigation of the April 12th incident involving David Lee Bruton. Following Mr. Combs' statement, we're going to open the floor to questions from the media. I also want to remind you there are not going to be any one-on-one interviews after this presser. If you have questions for these officials, please ask them when the question and answer portion of this press conference takes place. Again, thank you so much for coming to cover this. And first up, the Honorable Mayor of Kinston, Dontario Hardy.
Well, first off, good to see everybody. Thank you for coming out to this press conference that we have here today. Good evening. My name is, of course, Mayor Don Hardy, City of Kinston. I'd like to thank you for coming out today to today's press conference. I'd also like to thank the residents of Kinston for their patience while we have diligently investigated the incident that occurred on April 12th. We wanted to make sure that we crossed every T and dotted every I and to weigh out any perception of any type of bias whatsoever, as we must always continue to govern by the policy and procedures we have in place by this governing agency, this governing body, by the city ordinances passed by this body, and the state laws that are passed by our North Carolina General Assembly. We can assure you that we have gone above and beyond to have an external review of the incident that has taken place on April 12, 2021. But I will yield the floor to Chief Tim Dilday and expert John Combs as we expound upon the details of such incident and how we arrived to the conclusion that we have today. I yield the floor now to Chief Dilday.
Thank you, Mayor Hardy.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. So on Monday, April the 12th at 6:38 p.m., Kinston police officers responded to an alarm at 111 West Vernon Avenue. Upon their arrival, officers discovered that there was an ongoing disturbance involving customers, which rose to the level of an employee triggering a silent alarm to gain necessary and immediate assistance from law enforcement. During the investigation, officers developed sufficient reasonable suspicion to detain one of the individuals involved in the disturbance. During the time the officers were conducting initial interviews inside of the business, the individual subject to detainment walked away from the area and was subsequently located nearby by officers. During the attempt to lawfully detain the individual, a foot pursuit ensued and the suspect was taken into custody along the 700 block of North Queen Street. Kinston Police Department supervisor arrived on the scene and began an initial investigation into the use of force utilized by an officer during the arrest. Glenville County EMS personnel were summoned by officers to the Kinston Police Department to render aid to the arrestee, David Lee Bruton, Jr., 36 of Kinston. Mr. Bruton was taken before a magistrate at the Glenville County Detention Center where he was charged with disorderly conduct, resisting officers, and assaulting a government official. Shortly after the arrest, a video was posted on social media which depicts Mr. Bruton being taken into custody at the end of the foot pursuit and force being utilized by an officer. As with all officer-involved uses of force, this matter has been thoroughly investigated. The internal investigation into this use of force incident has revealed that the attempt to detain Mr. Bruton was lawful activity and was required by the officers in this situation. In addition to his behavior at 111 West Vernon Avenue, Mr. Bruton's flight led to sufficient probable cause for arrest. The investigation reveals that the force utilized during the arrest was reasonable under the circumstances and not excessive or otherwise in violation of standard police practice and procedure. The force utilized, specifically punches, are taught in the basic law enforcement training curriculum and are a legitimate and accepted method to gain control of violent situations. The force utilized represents the minimum amount of force necessary to effect the arrest in this situation. To ensure accountability, city leaders requested an independent review of the investigation. Investigative materials were provided to an independent subject matter expert who is joining us tonight to discuss the results.
My name is John Combs. I was contacted by the appointed city attorney in this matter to review the materials involved concerning the arrest of Mr. Bruton and to give an opinion as to whether or not the officer's actions in this situation were reasonable. I reviewed the materials sent to me. I created a report with an opinion section. My opinion I will read as follows. The amount and method of force used by the officers on April 12th, 2021 were reasonable under the circumstances and were not excessive or otherwise in violation of standard police practice and law enforcement procedures and training standards. As the chief alluded to, the method of force, specifically again the punches, these are techniques that are taught in basic law enforcement training to law enforcement officers all across North Carolina. Punches specifically in an arrest scenario are used as a stun. A stun is used to create a window of opportunity for an officer to gain control of an arrestee or an otherwise resistive individual. They allow officers time to gain control, apply handcuffs, and get the individual the treatment that he or she needs. In this particular case, the officers properly used the techniques as they were trained. Again, whether you take basic law enforcement training at Lenore Community College or the North Carolina Highway Patrol or the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, all of these techniques are taught the same way to every officer across the state. Basic law enforcement training is a standardized training program, and these officers were taught these techniques in their training, and in my opinion, they utilized them properly and not in an excessive manner.
Very good. Questions for Mr. Combs and the other officials?
Can you spell your name first for us, just so we have it?
C-O-M-B-S.
Okay, and then my question is, we were told at the last press conference that one of the officers didn't have some of the training. What was it called?
Go ahead, sir.
So it's CIT training.
Okay.
And part of the investigation revealed that one of the officers was CIT training. That is not training that's required in North Carolina. That's something that is the City of Kinston Police Department. We have endeavored to put all of our officers through that week-long program. One of the officers has not CIT trained. Because of COVID, we have at least 6 classes that have been scheduled and subsequently canceled because of COVID. We do have 2 classes that are currently scheduled in the coming months, and that will bring all of our patrol officers, all of our uniformed patrol officers to be CIT trained. And CIT is Crisis Intervention Techniques. It's a 40-hour block of in-house instruction, teaching officers how to deal with mental illness type situations.
So that doesn't factor into, you said that that doesn't factor into this situation, since you said it's not required in North Carolina.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. CIT is a specialty topic area. It is not required, mandated, or overseen by the North Carolina Education and Training Standards Commission, which oversees all of law enforcement training in the state. It is not required, and again, it's not regulated by the Training Standards Commission. A department can decide whether or not they want to put all their officers through this training, none of their officers, or a handful of their officers. That's a department's issue. Certainly I applaud the City of Kinston for doing this, trying to get all their officers trained. A 40-hour training program that is above and beyond any training required in this state is certainly an excellent thing to do. However, it is not required, and it did not figure into my opinion one way or the other, because once again, this is a specialized training area.
I do want to just verify how long the investigation took.
Mine or the chief's?
Yours.
I don't have my time in front of me because I work on this as I can, bit by bit. Usually, you know, I'll try to put in 2 or 3 hours a day because I have several cases typically going at one time that I've been asked to look at. But I know that I have put in at least, it'd be in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 hours worth of review, writing the report, and so on.
And then if Chief can verify his as well.
The police department's internal investigation lasted 2 weeks.
I guess for the chief or the mayor, just a message to the community about, you know, the resolution of all this.
Yeah, so as we move forward, and as you heard the expert speak, Mr. Combs and Chief of Police, you know that we do what's necessary or go above and beyond the call of the duties that the law enforcement officers actually do need or is necessary according to state training. So we just want to let our community know that we are doing more than enough. We have gone above and beyond, and I just want to assure everyone that we have crossed every T and dotted every I, and I just think that we have some great police officers here at the city of Kinston. We have great staff, our great city personnel standing behind me here, our council. I think we do a great job at making sure that we do what's necessary and make sure that there's transparency across the board and to weigh out any perception of any bias what's by any means necessary.
And I should have identified, before you answer, Chief, I should have identified the other people that are up here too. Antonio Pearl Hardy, City Councilman, Mayor Pro Tem Felicia Solomon, and City Councilman Sammy Aiken that are up here with us too. And I apologize. I should have. Chief, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll add to the mayor's comments to say that all across this nation, all across the state of North Carolina, and obviously here in the city of Kinston, we are all thinking about what we want policing to look like currently and what we want the policing to look like in the future. And those are hard discussions that we're all having because of recent events in our country and that we'll continue to have. And those will be open and transparent and community involved as we move forward.
Chief, while you're up there, can you expound on some of the police department community involvement?
So absolutely. So we've all, and I don't want to say, COVID-19 has hampered us, but it has hampered all of us in our ability to just be connected as human beings. But we are continuing to reach out in any way that we can to connect with our community. We have not stopped any of our services in our schools. We spend copious amounts of time, not only in our high school and middle school where we have officers assigned. We currently assign an officer to elementary school, one to move around to our elementary schools. But every school, every morning, we have officers there. There's a security element that's more about a security element. It's about building relationships with young folks. So as we come through COVID and are allowed more mobility and connectivity in the community, you'll see us back out like we were in 2019. Thank you, sir.
I'm Mayor Pro Tem Felicia Solomon, and just to add to the comments from our mayor and our chief about the continued work. As a community, it's important for all of us to know that at the beginning of the day, we all have the same hope, that our officers and that our citizens, that they are able to operate in mutual respect, that there is accountability held for all members of the community. That we understand that our law enforcement officers, that they sacrifice and they have a very dangerous job, but one that is called to protect and to serve. And as the chief said, as we move forward and we also continue to tackle what is a national conversation, that there will be difficult conversations. And in these conversations, it is possible to support the police and to support our citizens. That this is not a police against citizens, but this is our community. And there are difficult conversations that many will perceive as difficult. But as was stated to you, when we look at state policies and procedures and trainings, that's why there's a national conversation being held. Because many of us believe what? That everything that is permissible is not beneficial. And so when we look at continuing the work that we're doing in trying to create community policing, defining what policing looks like in our community, making sure that we establish a culture where all of our citizens are supported. It will take the community to do so. And so I would just, say, to the members of our community that as we even embark in this season of change, as many of you are aware, our beloved chief is scheduled to retire. that even in this season of change, the task is to take the baton and to grow the work in even a greater way, where there may be new additions made, such as when we consider there have been conversations with our city manager about instituting community review boards. Because as we move forward, representation is important at every table. And so when we talk and have those conversations about what does policing look like in our community, the responsibilities that we have within our immediate communities, one to another, to citizens, to law enforcement to us, and that mutual respect. The goal is for us to have representation at the table that reflects our whole community. Because at the beginning and the ending of the day, we want our officers to be able to go home safely, to love on their family, to know that they're appreciated, and for our citizens to know that they are in partnership and that they have sound relationships that are trusting between them and our law enforcement officers.
Very good. Chris?
I just have 6 questions for you guys. Can I get a copy of the report?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and can I get a copy of all your prepared statements that you read tonight?
My opinions are in my written report. We will certainly provide that to you.
And you read something from the podium? Can I have that?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. So what's the status of the officers right now? Have they been reinstated? Are they going to be reinstated on Monday? What's the, how does
Yes,
that work?
so it's almost 7 o'clock on a Friday night. They remain on administrative leave. Beginning next week, beginning Monday, we'll begin a process to bring them back to full duty. They've been under an extremely stressful event themselves over the past 3 weeks. So we will begin a process to bring them back, get them reacclimated, and return to full duty.
So, I mean, reacclimated, so that sounds like they might not be on patrol next week. We don't.
Well, I'd have to check their schedules. I can't tell you which day, but they'll come in Monday. We'll bring them back in the office and make sure that they're in a position where we can get them back to work.
So you got one of my other questions of
Surely.
why are we doing this now? 7 o'clock on a Friday. When was the investigation wrapped up? Some would say that it's trying to cover it up by doing it this late
I
on a
believe our
Friday.
city manager will take that.
So give us
Surely.
some context here, please, if you don't mind.
No, happy to do so. The council was made aware of the conclusion of the report earlier this week, and Mr. Combs came and made a personal presentation of his findings before the council, allowed the council to answer those questions. And one of the things that Councilwoman Solomon has said is about transparency and getting answers to the community as quickly as we could. As you know, Mr. Combs has other duties and he's working on other things. No matter when the meeting was going to be held, it would have been held after 6 p.m. because that's when, unfortunately, he was going to be available. The conclusion came. Today was the first day that we were available to do it, and we found it necessary to go ahead and produce that. There's no attempt to do anything other than come to the community at the quickest time. That also allowed Mr. Combs to appear before us and make his statements and make himself available for you for your question.
So when was the investigation concluded officially?
Wednesday.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, any more questions?
Oh, I
Or you
got
go-
my last one. Earlier on when we talked the first time, you guys were trying to get other videos to help put together a fuller picture of what happened. Did you ever receive other videos from the community?
We did receive additional via social media, but none were as clear as the original one posted.
Since those are not body cam videos, can we get a copy of those videos?
Mr. Colley,
Let's get those videos, please.
absolutely.
Okay,
Very
that's all
good.
I have.
Anyone else? Again, thank you so much for coming out and covering this event, and we'll be in touch with you as soon as we can about